What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. And joining me today, Chris Fedor, cleveland.com Cavs beat reporter, coming from the Sunshine State, Orlando, Florida, where it is currently 60 degrees, and it is 11:30 at night, while me and Jimmy Watkins, cleveland.com columnist, are holding it down in Cleveland, Ohio, where it is currently 10 degrees and feels like 5. While things might have been all hunky-dory when it comes to the weather, that's not necessarily what happened for the Cavs when it comes to their arrival to Orlando. Obviously, they ended up coming away with a win, 119-105, but we're here to talk to you guys about the game itself, but also what the Cavs had to do to get it. It's the second night of a back-to-back. The Cleveland Cavaliers did not arrive to Orlando and get in their beds until 4:35 a.m., and were still short-handed. They didn't have Darius Garland. They didn't have Max Strus. They didn't have Sam Merrill, and DeAndre Hunter was a late add to the injury report and was out with right knee soreness. Yet they still found a way. And with this victory, Cleveland has now won 5 of its last 6 games, has won 10 of its last 14 since December 29th, and has taken 6 of its last 7 road games. They're the 5th seed in the Eastern Conference and 2 games back from the 2nd-seeded Boston Celtics. What stands out is that these wins haven't all looked the same, but they've all been gritty. Some have been defense-oriented, some have been offense-oriented. Guys, in this recent stretch, more about the Cavs finally building habits that travel, or are they simply surviving a favorable run while leaning heavily on effort and stars more than they had at the beginning of the season? We know this Orlando Magic team has struggled as of late.
I mean, I think there's some real staying power potential for what we've seen the last 14 games, the last 24 hours, I should say, in particular. This Orlando game's a really easy game to just chalk up a loss to. The second half of the back-to-back with the late DeAndre Hunter scratch, with the Donovan said after the game that he didn't get to sleep until like 4:30 or 5 a.m. today. A lot of life stuff getting thrown at the Cavs, a lot of schedule stuff getting thrown at the Cavs, a lot of opportunities to lag naturally. And we know that they have done a lot of that this season. But I think that this win in particular, against, again, the Magic are struggling to put their pieces together. They've had some injuries this year as well. But a talented team, a team that certainly knows the Cavs well, and a team that the way they play can be a problem for the Cavs. Their physicality, especially when the Cavs are in this diminished state, can be a big problem for a Cavs team that's coming off of a back-to-back against the Kings. And I will not call either of these last 2 wins the prettiest things you'll ever see. Like, a lot of struggles on the offensive end tonight, on the defensive end last night. But when you're down a couple guys and you're trudging through a tough regular season stretch, 3 and 4 nights, like, it's a results-based business. And we're not grading on style points right now. I don't know that I'm not declaring anyone or anything back or on the right track or championship bound or anything like that. This is just better than what we've been seeing. It's a better response to adversity, and it's a better response to physicality. The Cavs are bringing it at a baseline level. The thing that has eluded them for a long time, readiness and engagement, and the things that we were criticizing them. The most frustrating part of this season has been at least temporarily corrected. And that's progress. That's legitimate progress.
I mean, I think you hit on it, Jimmy. Kenny Atkinson even said pregame that he contemplated leaving guys back in Cleveland. That a couple of weeks ago when he was mapping out the schedule, was this going to be a rest night for the Cavs? And it could have been. But the only 2 that were left back in Cleveland were Sam Merrill and Max Strus. Donovan played, Evan Mobley played, Jared Allen played. I think at one point during the season, early on in the season, this might have been a situation where Kenny rested guys and left them back in Cleveland. But I think he likes the way that they're playing. I think he likes the continuity. I think he likes the chemistry and the momentum that they're building. And you're right, it hasn't been pretty. And we talked about it a couple of podcasts ago that they're going to just have to win ugly until the All-Star break. And we just have to reset expectations because for them, because they dug such a big hole at the beginning of the season and they were fighting just to become a playoff team, they have reset their own expectations. They're looking at it saying, hey, like, yes, we have a standard. Yes, there is a bigger picture in play here, but we want to get top 4. Coming into this season, they were the Eastern Conference co-favorites. Now they are on record saying that we just want top 4. We need to get top 4, and then we'll figure it out from there. We'll see if we can continue to build. But like, they set this mini goal for themselves of getting back into the top 4 of the Eastern Conference. And however they're going to do that, they're going to do that. I do think one of the byproducts of everything that they have gone through at the beginning of the season is just like falling into things, lineups, combinations, a certain kind of style, some go-to sets. And I think it's fascinating that if Darius doesn't get hurt against Philadelphia, we probably don't see this 5-man lineup very much that we're seeing starting games for the Cavs. I don't know that they would have gotten to it. Maybe there would have been instances throughout the course of the game where Kenny Atkinson was like, hey, I just really want a whole bunch of size out there. Or maybe there are instances throughout the course of the second half of the season where Kenny Atkinson says, hey, I want like defensive tenacity out on the perimeter. So let me put Jaylon Tyson next to Dean Wade, surrounded by the 2 bigs of Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen. But the 5-man starting group that they've been using during this stretch since Darius went down, since Sam Merrill went down, has provided like a different level of competitiveness, a different level of intensity, a different level of defensive capability, and it's becoming a workable 5-man lineup. And I'm not saying that when Darius comes back that he's not going to be in the starting lineup. Of course he is. Or Sam Merrill. Maybe Kenny Atkinson considers that. But in different points of a game, now Kenny knows that there's this 5-man lineup that he can go to. Who knows when he might need it? But now that he's seen the success of these guys, he can go to. It's something that he can put in his back pocket, and it's a card that he can play. And Donovan was kind of talking about that following the game, going through the adversity, playing as badly as they did at the beginning of the season, with a level of inconsistency. It forced them to find things that they maybe otherwise would not have. Look at what Tyrese Proctor did coming off the bench tonight. There's just one game, but that was a dude who was ready for the moment. Look at what Naquan Tomlin is doing, continuing to get more and more minutes, playing his way up the depth chart. These kinds of things don't happen if the Cavs are full strength for the first 45 games. These kinds of things don't happen if they don't deal with the adversity in the first 45 games. So if there is a byproduct of the crummy play that the Cavs had at the beginning of the season and the fact that they dug themselves into a hole in the Eastern Conference, it's kind of what we're seeing right now.
And Chris, I think you make a really good point, and there's a through line to the Donovan Mitchell conversation, right? Donovan is being guarded defensively in a way that he hasn't seen for his entire career to this level, to this intensity on that end of the floor, night in and night out, because teams are attacking him because they don't have to go at Darius Garland and him on the floor, right? So now you have the opportunity to learn what that is going to be like, because as we know, the Cavs cannot play Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell together the entirety of playoff games. So now going into playoff matchups, you have that understanding. And I think we saw it with Donovan when he was first getting those looks defensively. He struggled a little bit over the last 5 games. We kind of seen him progress as teams were continuing to throw out the same kind of look at him, that him being able to get out of these splits, having less turnovers, growing as an offensive guru, and all these things. I think you got to see just the IQ that he plays with. And it kind of goes back to the same thing that we've seen from Evan Mobley, right? At the beginning of the season, he wasn't an offensive focal point. He wasn't ready for the swarming that defenses were setting at him. Now, after playing off and with Donovan Mitchell throughout the season, he's gotten more acclimation to that. And now you see him and Kenny Atkinson willing to split them up again. And Evan looks more comfortable in those roles. And to go back to Donovan Mitchell for a second. Obviously, we know he had 36 points. He ended with 9 assists, just 3 turnovers, 15 of 30 from the field, which was needed because of the needed offensive creation. But the biggest thing for me was how he's been able to produce in the second half. Donovan Mitchell either scored or assisted on 41 of Cleveland's 64 second half points, finishing with 27 points on 11 of 18 shooting and 6 assists in that second half. That performance came shortly after Donovan Mitchell admitted publicly that he expects to be more fatigued because of how aggressively teams are guarding him. That's the other thing we talked about earlier this season, guys. Like, Donovan came in saying that he understood that this team needed to get through the mental barrier of playing through fatigue. And there's a difference between knowing it and putting your body through it. And sure, it's not necessarily a great thing to have to do that this earlier into the season, but to have that experience, I feel like is going to help them down the line. But when we talk about going down the stretch of a game, Paolo Banchero and Donovan, we're kind of going back and forth a little bit. But I, to be honest, am always going to take Donovan over Paolo in those situations, especially when you have a guy like Evan Mobley defensively, who you have behind you that you can rely on. So when we talk about Donovan Mitchell and his growth as a leader, his growth with experience of mental toughness and all these things necessary to help this Cavs team get further into the playoffs, are we seeing Donovan Mitchell evolve into a smarter late game manager rather than just a closer? And how much of that confidence do you think comes from trusting Evan Mobley in the defensive structure that the Cavs have created behind it?
Well, I think there was a very important moment throughout the course of tonight's game against Orlando, and it happened in the second quarter. And as it's unfolding, the two teams were going back and forth. It was really, really competitive. But the time that the Cavs took control and built what was their biggest lead to that point of the game, Donovan wasn't out there. And there was a stretch within that Evan Mobley wasn't out there either. I was actually looking on the court and I'm saying, Donovan's on the bench. Wait, Evan's on the bench too. Look at this lineup. And Kenny went into tonight's game with kind of an all hands on deck type approach because he knew that these guys were exhausted. They got in at 3 a.m. They went to bed at 4, 4:30, 5, depending on who it was. They really didn't get too much opportunity to recover after last night's game against Sacramento. Everybody in the locker room was saying how stupid it was that last night's game was a 7:30 tip-off and this one was a 7 o'clock tip-off and it should have been reversed and all that kind of stuff. So that was going to be the approach that Kenny took going into the game. But that showed a level of trust, a level of belief, and it shows, Donovan has worked behind the scenes to empower these guys, just the way that he did last year. That's one of his greatest gifts, I think, as a leader, is getting these guys to buy in, getting these guys to believe.
It's funny how ugly this season has been to this point. Contrast that with how many uplifting stories there are on this team, right? Like Craig Porter Jr., Dean Wade's, that one goes back a while, but Naquan Tomlin, Sam Merrill, all these guys. Tyrese Proctor tonight, like Chris said, like in a season that has been such a struggle, an uphill boulder push, there's a lot of fun young guys pitching along for the ride. And I think that is a testament. Like, we've asked a lot of hard questions about this culture this year when the effort hasn't been there, when we've wondered who's going to speak up and hold people accountable. I think those questions remain. But I do think this is the flip side. Like, when people are frustrated with the Cavs messaging and maybe they're not as, maybe Kenny Atkinson doesn't rule with an iron fist as much as people want to. And maybe Donovan Mitchell doesn't come down on as hard on everyone else as you would like him to. This is the flip side of that coin. This is how you can get a little bit more. This is how you get a Craig Porter Jr. to punch above his weight. This is how you get a Tyrese Proctor to come in. Sometimes Tyrese Proctor comes in, looks like a rookie. He had one of those games earlier this week. I came away watching the game thinking that's the most that Tyrese Proctor has looked like a rookie this year. And it's easy when you're in a new situation. He's the newest guy out of all of them, to when that happens, to kind of withdraw and lose your confidence, sort of be bashful the next opportunity you get. Tonight he comes off the bench. He was excellent in the limited minutes that he had. Last night against Sacramento, I think he only played like 4 minutes, but he made an impact during those. He made the one shot that he took. that's the flip side of this coin. Okay, I still think you want more, particularly for some of the guys who are a little bit higher on the rung here. You want a little bit more of a push, a nudge, a hey, what's going on here, Evan Mobley, when you're taking 2 shots in the second half against Charlotte? Can we have a little bit more of that? And Donovan said after last night's game that they did have a conversation about that. I think there's a way you can massage those messages. And I think you see with the emergence of these young guys, the benefits of patience and the benefits of having a star who is willing to give them ownership. I mean, he doesn't have much of a choice. Donovan Mitchell is seeing a sea of bodies everywhere he goes. So someone's got to help him. Some of this is just like out of necessity. I need you guys. But sometimes when that's the case, stars can get frustrated because it is frustrating when you're as good as he is to see all these bodies and not be able to impact the game the way you're used to impacting the game all the time, because there's just so much action. You have to get off the ball. The right play is to get off the ball and empower others. And sometimes when they don't respond the way you want them to, like it would have been real easy for Donovan to just quit on Jaylon Tyson against the Kings last night after he had multiple turnovers where the Kings are denying the ball and Jalen's just trying to do what he thinks is the right thing to do and give Donovan Mitchell the ball. Ended up in 2 bad turnovers. Then at the end of the game, the Cavs go right back to him, hit him on the short roll. He has the floater. Like, that's what we're talking about here with Donovan's leadership style. It's forgiving, and that forgiveness is very powerful when you are a young guy who comes into this league looking up to that dude. That is very powerful.
Kenny Atkinson even said it before the game, guys, that a big part of the player development of the Cavs isn't even the coaches. It's Donovan. It's the fact that these guys look toward Donovan. Everybody that comes into the NBA that's a young player has a vet that they speak very, very highly of. And for all of these young guys, their vet is Donovan. Tyrese Proctor's vet is Donovan. Jaylon Tyson's vet is Donovan. And they look up to him, and they listen to him, and they believe in the things that he's saying to them. Dean Wade was even joking following the game. I was talking to him a little bit about his end of fourth quarter stretch where he was just awesome. He made that 3 that really put the game out of reach. He had a block again, just like he did the other night on the road. He had a couple of rebounds. He had a steal or 2 steals, finished with 3 in the game. But I was talking to Dean about that, and he's like, I had to shoot that because otherwise Donovan would have been on my ass. So, like, Donovan has a way, even though it may not be as demonstrative, it may not be the same way that other stars go about it, but Donovan has a way of getting through to these guys. And when that ball went to the way of Dean Wade, he knew that he had to shoot it. Otherwise, Donovan was going to be on his ass. And he joked, he said, I'm tired of Donovan yelling at me for passing up these open threes. Because, like, part of my responsibility, if I'm going to be out there in those situations and the ball finds me and it's a quality look, I can't turn that down because I don't know that we're going to get a better look within that possession. So I had to shoot that, and I shot that with confidence. And I think it all kind of goes back to the foundation that Donovan builds behind the scenes, the way that he empowers these guys. And it's different for everybody. The way that he communicates with Dean is different than the way that he talks to Darius and Evan. And that's what a leader does. But there's no doubt about it that there is a Donovan Mitchell effect on this basketball team. And there's a Donovan Mitchell effect everywhere he has gone throughout the course of his career.
Yeah, Christian. And to that point about the leadership aspect, and obviously you can't talk to everybody the same way. You have to figure out what works for each person. But Tyrese Proctor, and I've written this for the website for cleveland.com about just how those two have literally been inseparable, basically, since the summertime. Donovan took him back to Louisville for a practice, like to be a part of that. And Donovan most recently took him to St. Ed's with July Jones to just watch a game. And those two guys are just together all the time. And that leadership style is important. We've talked a lot about the leadership qualities that might be needed, the voices that might be needed. Like, obviously, Donovan leads in a certain kind of way. And it's not us saying that Donovan needs to lead differently. It's that somebody else in the locker room needs to help him with that as well. Because as Kobe Bryant used to say, being a leader is lonely. So, like, if you
Mm.
have other people that are willing to lead alongside you, that makes that burden a lot less heavy to carry.
Jimmy brought up the Jaylon Tyson on the short roll. There is a clear chemistry building between Donovan and Jaylon when it comes to that. And Kenny touched on it before the game when I asked him about it. And he was saying that, part of it is the better defenders are defending Evan Mobley. So they don't want to continuously put Evan Mobley in the screen with Donovan because now all of a sudden it's two good defenders going at Donovan. Usually the weaker defender is on Jaylon Tyson because he's still a relative unknown. And if he's going to share the court with Darius when healthy, Donovan, you're not going to use a better defender on Jaylon Tyson. You're going to use your better defenders on Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. Duh. And then Evan Mobley as well. So part of the reason behind it is, hey, they see an opportunity here with a lesser defender. If they're going to switch, then Donovan's got a good matchup. Or if they're going to blitz, then Jaylon can kind of be the guy who's in a 4-on-3 situation. He can hit that floater. He can play make a little bit. But the other thing is, before practices and after practices, before shoot-arounds and after shoot-arounds, Jaylon and Donovan are going through that over and over and over again. And Donovan's talking to Jaylon about screening angles. Donovan's saying, hey, when a defense does this, I want you to do this. Jaylon's talking to Donovan about what he's seeing throughout the course of that as well. So the fact that they have built the relationship behind the scenes, something that goes all the way back to this summer in their off-season runs, the player-organized ones, they now spend extra time. They see a pathway to another opportunity to diversify the offense. And these two guys, Jaylon and Donovan, talk through the short roll constantly. And they work through it on the court as well. And you're seeing that chemistry continuing to build with those guys. At the end of the first quarter, the Cavs went to that as their final set of the first quarter. In the game the other night against Sacramento, it's late in the game. The Cavs went to it. Against Philadelphia, it's late in the game. The Cavs went to it. The Donovan Mitchell, Jaylon Tyson pick and roll, and whatever the Cavs are going to get out of it, sometimes it's going to be Donovan. Sometimes it's going to be Jaylon on the short roll. Sometimes it's going to be Jaylon on the floater. Sometimes it's going to be Jaylon playmaking and kicking it out to the corner. But that particular set has become really, really effective for the Cavs, and it certainly wouldn't be that same kind of way if these guys didn't have the kind of connection that they're continuing to build.
And while we give praise to Donovan for that, I think we also have to give praise for Jaylon Tyson for being coachable in that. It is so difficult to get players who are finding a groove. Like, we have seen Jaylon Tyson become arguably the best three-point shooter on this Cavs team. And yet he still wants to go and be in the half roll for Donovan. And he's finding tricks with that as well. Like, Jaylon Tyson doesn't set the usual screen. He's not getting still and like putting his hands over his crotch to make sure he doesn't get hurt. All these things. He's using two hands and tagging the screener and kind of pushing off to gain separation between him and his defender. And that allows Donovan to have a window of opportunity to either get him the ball or find where a space might create and put it to the area where Jaylon can go and get it. And then, as Chris said, make the decision from there. And I think finding what works for you, and when it comes to a second-year player, because obviously we've talked about it, Evan Mobley screens a certain way, Jared Allen screens a certain way. And I've asked opposing coaches the beauty of screening when it comes to especially players like Domantas Sabonis of the Sacramento Kings. Like, you see how he sets DHOs, and Kenny Atkinson and Doug Christie talked about like there being like 3 different ways that he sets these DHOs to create opportunities for the players coming around him or for himself. The other way is Jaylon Tyson being more of a soft screener and then allowing himself to create space on his own and for others around him because he's not using that physicality. And it also allows him to play more minutes because he's not taking that brute force the same way that Jarrett and Evan do as a smaller guard. But when we talk about Jarrett and Evan, and I think this is important, the Cavs and Kenny Atkinson have gone to this big man, too big lineup to end games more recently. Could that be because Sacramento plays with two bigs? Could that be because they've been playing with the lead more as of late? Yes and yes. But I think it's important to note that the belief has been there to go to this lineup of Dean Wade, Evan Mobley, and Jared Allen, because when you're playing with the lead, Kenny Atkinson has talked about this. You want to preserve that. You're allowed to play more big. You're allowed to have more of a defensive front. But when you're playing from behind, you usually want to have a smaller unit, small ball lineup that allows you to have more scoring opportunities. So I'm curious, Jimmy, for you, do you think this is a shift towards size and lineup balance, a temporary response to injuries, or is it the clearest signal yet of how Kenny Atkinson envisions this team closing meaningful games? Because I think it's a balancing act when it comes to the matchups and injuries and all these things. So I'm curious if you think this is a right now thing or something that can be maintained, especially in the playoffs.
I think it's kind of both. Like, I think the Cavs kind of got bullied into rediscovering their defensive identity here out of necessity. And I would like to think that they'll carry it forward because they're learning some interesting things, relearning some interesting things about like the Dean Wade, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen lineup. That's been an elite defensive trio for a couple of seasons now. But Dean Wade, due in part to injury and due in part to waning confidence, has been a harder guy to play for the Kenny Atkinson era Cavs because when healthy, this team is deeper than than some of the other teams that Dean Wade has had more of a featured role on, and it's been more offense focused. And when he's not making his shots, that's the one thing that Kenny doesn't stand for is when he's not making them, is when he's not shooting them. And sometimes he gets to the point where he's not shooting them. That's to Chris's point earlier about Donovan's always yelling at him to shoot him. He wants you to play, man, because he knows how important you are to the team's success. So yeah, I think it's Darius Garland's hurt, Sam Merrill's hurt, Max Strus is hurt. You are running out of dudes here, and the guys that you can trust now happen to be the ones that are better equipped to defend. And I don't know that that's what it should have taken for the Cavs to get here, but it's what it took. Kenny has leaned super hard into these defense first lineups, especially when Donovan sits. Chris referenced the no Don, no Evan lineups earlier. Ethan looked at me last night during the Kings game. It was like Craig and Jaylon and Dean Wade and Jared Allen and maybe DeAndre Hunter. Like the question in our minds was, where's the offense coming from? But that's not really the point. The point is the defense is going to create the offense because if you have that much size and length on the court, it can really help your defense. And I think this is, again, whether it should have taken this, we could debate, but the Cavs have found something. They have rediscovered their defensive groove here with a Dean Wade, Jared Allen, Evan Mobley pairing with leaning into more of the two bigs. And that's something that they can carry forward with them when everybody comes back. And I think that is crucial. For all the ups and downs this season, the Cavs defense has been a pretty consistent downturn this season. And they need to rediscover the focus, the personnel groupings that made them one of the league's best defense. And again, I think circumstances kind of bullied them into it, but you'd rather have that than not have it at all.
Jimmy, you mentioned injuries, and that's where I want to go for this last bit of our conversation. Tonight, the Cavs knew they were going to be without their usual three of Sam Merrill, Max Strus, and Darius Garland, but Darius Garland went through an individual workout ahead of the Cavs game in Orlando, continuing his rehab from a right great toe sprain while still managing that left great toe injury that he had offseason surgery on. He's also been traveling with the team, which is a positive sign in terms of what we call progress and day-to-day functionality. But to me, one workout doesn't necessarily signal an imminent return, right? It's more of a checkpoint, allowing the Cavs to evaluate how he's moving, responding, and still living with that pressure and pain that he's going to have to endure for likely the remainder of the season. But because of that, a return after the All-Star break remains very much in play in my mind, and not unlikely because Cleveland has also shown that it's going to be extremely cautious because of the value of what he brings when he's on the floor, but also using this stretch, as we mentioned on this podcast, how to learn these lineups and the functionality of them without Garland available, or even when he's just on the bench waiting to get subbed back into the game. So I think this is all very important. I think Darius Garland making a return will help the Cavs ultimately because the offense still looks different when he's on the floor, but nobody in the organization really feels like they're rushing him to get back. The biggest one was DeAndre Hunter being added to the injury report before the game, which led to more minutes for players who we haven't seen as much this season. Lonzo Ball and Thomas Bryant both found minutes, while the only active player who didn't play tonight was Larry Nance Jr. And guys, I don't want to overhype it, but Lonzo Ball and Thomas Bryant both had good minutes tonight. And Lonzo Ball was playing well defensively, which we know is important for this Cleveland Cavaliers team. He came away with 3 steals. He also had 8 rebounds, which is huge for this team. Thomas Bryant was a plus 13 on the floor, even though he didn't contribute necessarily as much in the box score. He was doing things that made winning plays, playing with effort, playing with tenacity, all the things that we know of Thomas Bryant. But guys, I think the biggest question is when Darius Garland returns and the roster stabilizes itself, do the Cavs revert to what they were earlier in the season, or has the injury-driven stretch fundamentally reshaped how they view rotations, roles, and even trade priorities? Because this Cavs team came into the season talking about the depth, talking about wanting to explore that and especially in the front court, be able to utilize what they have. And what we've talked about throughout today's podcast is the opportunities that Tyrese Proctor has gotten, Craig Porter Jr. has gotten, and those guys being able to perform might have earned them more minutes, more rotation minutes than Kenny Atkinson might have thought they would have gotten earlier into the season. And I'm curious because we've already heard Kenny Atkinson talking about a 9-10 man rotation, especially when it comes to the playoffs and how difficult it is to play with flexibility. But we also seen, especially last year with the Indiana Pacers, how they playing with depth help them when it comes to their mobility, their pace, and all the things that they do. How important is it for this Cavs team to find what works best for them, whether that's the 9 to 10 man rotation or expanding it and allowing their depth to shine through?
I think it's just going to remain fluid. I think the best coaches in the NBA don't just set something in stone and stick with it no matter what happens. I think it's about situation. I think it's about matchups. I think it's about who's being productive coming off the bench. And it's a lot easier for Kenny Atkinson to feel like he could go to Lonzo Ball when Lonzo does what he did tonight. It's a lot easier for Kenny Atkinson to go to Craig Porter Jr. when he's doing a little bit of everything to help the team. And I think the truth is, and it's the same thing that it's been last year, the year before that, if you're not named Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen, and Darius Garland, maybe even Sam Merrill, the way that he has expanded his role, your role is going to fluctuate. It's going to be fluid. And baked into your role is a level of uncertainty of how many minutes you're going to play. Are you going to close? Are you not going to close? Who are you going to share the floor with? And it's just going to be on the players to continue to adapt to that. And it's going to be on the players to, when their number is called, when they do get the bigger opportunity, like Tyrese Proctor tonight, like Thomas Bryant tonight, like Lonzo Ball tonight, you step up and you deliver because that's your role on this basketball team. Not everybody can be high usage Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, and Evan Mobley. Some guys you just have to fill in the gaps, and some guys you just have to wait your turn. So I do think the good thing for all of that the Cavs have gone through is that Tyrese Proctor is capable. Thomas Bryant is capable. Lonzo Ball, in the right environment, with the right set of circumstances, it's pretty clear at this point in the season that the best version of Lonzo that the Cavs are going to get is when he gets multiple days to let his body recover. And it's clear that this new form of management that Kenny Atkinson and the coaching staff and the training staff, that they all decided to do with Lonzo is going to be the best thing for Lonzo. Because he looked a little bit fresh tonight. He looked a little bit spry tonight. He looked like a guy who had his legs. He was getting lift on his shot. It wasn't as flat. He was active in the passing lanes. He was going after rebounds with force. And it's not a coincidence that it has come after he got a little bit extra time to allow his body to recover, his knees to recover. And the other thing is, when he's not playing these game days, he's able to do other things as opposed to recovery the next day. He's able to get on the court the next day. He's able to get in the weight room the next day. He's able to get on the treadmill and Versa climber and stuff like that. Because his body responds better when he doesn't play back to back or he doesn't play every other game. And the Cavs were using him a lot throughout the course of the beginning of the season. And I think they realized that they just can't do that at this stage of his career. I also don't think it was a coincidence that Nance did not play the second game of a back-to-back. I think they have to be smart when it comes to managing Larry as well, and that's part of the coach's responsibility. But I think when it comes to rotations and lineups, these things are going to be fluid.
They'll be fluid until they're not. The idea that a coach needs to find a 9 to 10 man rotation, that's not a novel thing for Kenny Atkinson to say. That's the goal that I think every NBA coach strives for. And they also strive for that decision to be hard on the back end, which this will be an interesting situation to monitor once everyone starts coming back, and we'll see how the hierarchy sorts itself out. But like Samuel, Max Strus, Darius Garland, those are ironclad members of the rotation. Those are 25-minute-a-night guys. And so these are good stories. Naquan Tomlin is a great story. Craig Porter Jr.'s emergence is important. Tyrese Proctor looks like he's got a promising future, but it's important to show that these guys are capable in case in case stuff hits the fan, which is where we're at right now, right? Stuff has hit the fan. Darius Garland is hurt again. Sam Merrill and Max Strus are both out. Those are two very important pieces of your offense. Anyone, please come fill these minutes. And they're doing it. Tyrese Proctor is producing. Craig Porter Jr. is greasing the wheels on the offense. This is all very important. I don't know that big picture, like playoff time. I don't know if these are names that we will be saying, and if we are saying them, something else has gone wrong, but it's still good. Like over the course of 82, to have this kind of depth, to build this for the future. So I'm thinking like the next time, if something happens this time next year, when Darius or Donovan, someone important, is missing, maybe there's a little bit shorter of a learning curve. Like maybe that doesn't result in like a 24-20 start to the season, a drift into the play-in. Like it's more natural plug and play. And for everything I just said, notice I didn't downplay Jaylon Tyson. Jaylon Tyson is just straight up a playoff rotation player.
Yes.
If not eventually a starter this year. Like that guy, he has proven himself to a different degree, a different level than a lot of these other guys. That's a happy accident, a product of an experiment the Cavs didn't really know they were going to have to run this year with him, right? Like they were telling us before the season, he's going to crack the rotation. No, he's a starter. No, he's a 30-minute-a-game guy. No, he's like one of 3.5 players that you can count on this team to give you double figures every night. And his motor is the rare one on this roster that doesn't seem to sputter ever. Like that guy just brings it. His offensive rebounding, his pursuit of offensive rebounds is incredible. Jaylon Tyson is like the guy when Kenny Atkinson turns on the film and he is trying to teach guys that like rebounding is a skill of desire. Just watch Jaylon Tyson. That's all it is. That guy just runs at the rim and gets his hand on the ball. He's not always the first one to touch the ball, but he's usually the one that ends up with the possession. And all these guys, it's important for the Cavs to develop all this stuff. But Jaylon Tyson is the silver lining of all silver linings through the first 47 games into the season now.
If Jaylon shows that he can handle it in the playoffs, when the playoffs start, and I have no reason to question whether or not he can. I think he's built for the playoffs. I've talked about that before. So if he shows that he is ready and he is capable and he's not fazed by everything that playoff basketball is, and he's just ready for the moment like I think he is, he's going to get more minutes than DeAndre. He just does more. And he does more kind of stuff that is playoffy than DeAndre does. And that doesn't mean that DeAndre doesn't have a role. It doesn't mean that DeAndre is not important. That's the thing about this team. everybody has a role, some bigger than others. Some minutes are going to be more expansive than others, but everybody has a role, and DeAndre is going to have a role, just like I believe Max Strus, whatever version of Max they get, he's going to have a role, just like Sam Merrill, he's going to have a role. But if Jaylon Tyson is built for the playoffs. I truly believe that. And if he shows that that is true, he's going to get more minutes than DeAndre Hunter.
To Jimmy's point, we are now at the 47 game mark of the season. The Cavs are 27-20. We talked about this a couple of podcasts ago. The Cavs aren't necessarily going to make every game pretty, but stacking wins is the most important thing for this team at this point in the season. And again, they're only 2 games back from the Boston Celtics, who hold the 2nd seed in the Eastern Conference. They're 7 games back from the Detroit Pistons, who just look really good. But again, the Cavs will make their way back to Cleveland to play Orlando again on Monday at Rocket Arena. But with all that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. This is where you can send in your weekly Hey Chris questions. And the only way to do so is signing up for Subtext. Sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word stop. It's easy, but we can tell you that anybody who signs up sticks around because they know the content, the information, the insight that they're getting on a daily basis. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.